We have a very major problem in the East African community, and like one of the panelists said earlier, we have a very terrible example for the new members. What is worrying is that President Ruto, as well as President Museveni, congratulated Samia Suluhu. Now, that congratulation itself is a very bad precedent, because we know, and international media has proven, and observers have proven, that the election was actually not fair. So to congratulate her is to also imply they support unfair processes. That is not the way to go. But the second thing is the title that Mama Samia Suluhu herself has abrogated to herself. That is Simba Jike. That goes exactly against the founding father Nyerere, who told CCM leaders that whenever they come to an election, they have to ensure that the candidates that run are people-centered, that it's the wish of the people that is respected. Now, if that is not the case, then of course, they are not only going against CCM founding father wishes, but they betray Nyerere, because Nyerere was one of the founders of the Organization of African Unity, or AU, alongside Nkrumah. And you know that Nyerere was against dictatorship. In fact, that's why he went into Uganda to remove Idi Amin in 1978-79. And Kaguta Museveni was observing all this. So to see Museveni, Ruto, and the cronies that they work with support a dictatorship, a dictatorial takeover of the will of the people, is a very bad example. And so I'm saying it's time for the citizens of East Africa, more than 400 million, I do believe, the East African community. It is time for the people to actually rise against all these dictators and show them the door, because that's not what we want. I mean, the East African Charter says we can move anywhere, we can interact anywhere. The African Charter also says that. So the Gen Z are not the only ones dissatisfied. A lot of us millennials are actually out to say, away with dictators, and it's a betrayal what is going on in East Africa.
And Dr. Kigame, having mentioned Kaguta Museveni, who thereafter came to power and never fulfilled his major pledge before the President of Parliament in Kampala, saying he will observe the Constitution and he will not overstay in power. It's more than 35 years later, and what's happening in Tanzania and also in Rwanda. Ideally, given all these examples, should Kenya, being the only free society and liberal, at best constitutional in terms of its democracy, be worried as we head to the ballot in 2027?
First of all, I need to correct you. Kenya is not a free society. Kenya has reverted back to the dictatorship that we used to see in the 1980s, when media was not free, when those who corrected the government were jailed and tortured. We have seen from the Gen Z uprising and so on that people were picked from their houses and killed and or abducted, including one of those that is being held in Uganda now. He's one of my friends. I was an independent presidential candidate in 2022. Bob Njagi was also an independent presidential candidate, and we were working together. So recently Bob was abducted by the Ruto administration because of wanting accountability and so on. And together with Nicholas Oyo, who I was also working with very closely, they are being held in Communicado in Uganda, having been taken away on 1st October. Now, look at the Kenyan Foreign Office, Musalia and his team. They have said absolutely nothing. Yeah. And you remember when Martha Karua and former CJ Mutunga were mercilessly pushed away at the airport and sent back to Kenya by Samia Suluhu. The Kenya's Foreign Office never said anything. And you can see the trend. You can see the conversations that are going on. I guess that's why Ruto and Museveni are congratulating, Suluhu. But it's not just the two. The African Union itself, which seems to be a stooge of the West, is a betrayal of the OAU. They're actually congratulating Samia Suluhu, even when SADC and so on are saying the election was not fair. The election did not even take place. Their gadgets were confiscated and so on. So we are worried about the Uganda people coming to an election in 2026. We are certainly worried about the trend in Kenya because with Ruto introducing all these bills to stifle free speech and so on, taking us back to the Moi days, I must say that we do not have too much hope unless the people rise up and say enough is enough. So I agree, civil society and the Gen Z should regroup and just tell these people, we don't want you. This is not the kind of East Africa we want.
Okay. And Dr. Rueben, pointing out the aspect of constitutional democracy, you talked about the president, and he certainly has no prosecutorial powers as Samia Suluhu Hassan does, for instance, the symbolism in terms of the power projection of the presidency, or what Kaguta Museveni can do in Uganda. He is limited to an extent. As a presidential aspirant who seeks the mandate from the people in 2027, what's the hope that you can sell the Kenyan people, leveraging on the institutions that were created by our constitution to bring the much-needed prosperity in our country?
That's a good question. The first thing we must really observe as people wanting a new Kenya, people who want a new East Africa, is that constitutionalism must be observed. Lazima tutekeleze katiba. This thing called katiba is not an ornamental document. When we hold a constitution up and say nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa katiba, it's not a joke, because the constitution is the lifeline of democracy. The constitution of Kenya, of Uganda, of Tanzania is really the one that guarantees the rule of law, order in society, justice, and so on. So if I am given a chance to show direction to Kenya as a president in 2027. Of course, personally, having worked with Linda Katiba, with Akina Martha Karua, and so on, I would actually be betraying the people if then I began to denigrate the Constitution. So the Constitution is the one that guarantees us the legitimacy to actually be in office. And so that is going to be, in fact, it's my second agenda. My first agenda is bomoa ufisadi, dismantle corruption. My second one is tekeleza katiba, implement the constitution in full, because we're all bound by it. And then, of course, the third one is Jengam Kenya. So when I look at East Africa and I look at all the elections, the institutions that are meddled with, like the IEBC in Kenya and so on, that's a worrying trend. And time has come for us to be truthful to ourselves, for us to be so resolute and say, we do not want dictators. That's not what we want in East Africa. We also do not want people that, begin to demonize us against each other. For Suluhu to say that it's Kenyans, it's foreigners, wageni, ndio wanafanya haya. Watanzania wenyewe wanasema hawamtaki, they don't want her. So, and by the way, Kenyans tried to even go in, the Gen Zs tried to go in at the border. They were turned away. So, which Kenyans are in there? Which Ugandans are there? So, I want to say it is so important for us to protect our democratic freedoms, because they were received, they were gotten through bloodshed, through suffering. People, like those who fought for multi-party democracy were jailed, they were beaten. Akina Njoya were beaten on the streets. Women had to even strip at Uhuru Park, fighting for this thing. And then you just come in one swoop and you begin to denigrate it. No, we will not allow it.
Okay, Dr. Kigame.